This is a view over my apple growing area. There's 11 apple trees and one pear that managed to get in there by accident around the border, and there's a fig tree sort of close on the top border. At the back of the orchard there's a Spanish bush trained cherry tree and a great big lemon verbena that I hack back mercilessly every year, and it just comes back and grows however it likes. And behind that is the berry growing area. It also has pears along the north border of that. So this is a bit closer now. We're right in the garden, and this is my fig tree. I did a lot of reading. My pruning Bible is by Jane Barkle-Vakius. I hope I got it right. She's got a book out called Pruning for Flowers and Fruit, and it's a book that makes the most sense to me. It's very readable and understandable. She suggested pruning the grapes to look very similar to grapes, so pruning the fig in the way that you would prune a grape. And so I have. She says that all these, there's lots of little shoots that can come up from all these little growth points all the way along there, so we'll see what happens. It grew very bushy last year. I got quite a lot of figs off it, but they all split. I've never had too much water in the place before, but this was the year, and they were nice, but they split before they ripened. These fruit trees that are down the west side of the garden, they're all apples. They're the late bearing varieties, and they are all espaliered. Not like the professionals that espalier them, but they're growing along like telegraph poles, I suppose, with lots of areas for fruit to grow. Now, I've left a lot more shoots on there than I should, partly because I need quite a lot of leafy cover because of the west sun and the hot wind that hits this full force in summer. And I'm going to trim things back a little bit further once they start flowering and I can see what's actually going to bear fruit. I know that they say the big fat bud will give you fruit, but some of the finer buds also seem to give me fruit, so I'll prune them back a little bit later when I know what I'm getting. At ground level below them I've got some nasturtiums growing. They've survived the frost so far, and there's even a couple of flowers in there. And down here a little bit, I think that these are actually proper leeks, which I intend to move out of there and plant so that they can actually mature properly. I did have perennial leeks along here somewhere, but I'm not sure whether I pulled them out and moved them up into a different garden bed. So the fruit trees along the north border are all on cordon. They took ages. I took ages to try to get them to produce fruit and to be trained into this cordon system, which was supposed to be so easy. Every year they would grow one shoot going up, and I would trim that back when it was pencil thickness to the right length, so the books told me. And the next year when it was supposed to grow fruit, it just grew another shoot a lot longer. So I'd trim that back and it would then grow another shoot a lot longer, so I ended up with a mess like over this side over here. This is the most robust of the fruit trees, and so all these branches that are growing up actually shouldn't be growing up. They should only be about 4 inches long and have fruit growing all the way along the trunk, but instead of that I've got a bushy growth. I am slowly trimming things back as I get more and more fruit each year, because I don't need that much fruit, and there's only so much you can share. Initially I tried to have swales in this area, but the slope is actually too steep. So after I tried to grow things on the north side of the slope, it actually nothing grew because the wind is just too hot. I decided that I would terrace it, so I went around the property and found loads and loads of fence posts, which I used first up. Then we pulled down a deck before it fell down, and so I've got the material from the deck. And way over the back, the top terrace is made out of wood from round somebody's spa. So in the middle, I've got some Rio that was just here hanging about, and up high I've got two gates. Now they were supporting my passion fruit up until this winter when I chopped it down because it got the virus, and I think there'll be raspberries growing there. I think I'm too late this year, but next year I'll do a bit of work on the soil over summer and the rest of winter, and next winter I'll be putting in raspberries on that terrace, and there'll be a blackberry of some sort on the middle one. Just here I thought I'd better show you a picture of my beautiful narcissus. It's planted here because they're supposed to repel rabbits and they are toxic to rabbits, but probably just one is not going to have a lot of effect, but you know, there'll be more. Here in front of the camera is a Stella cherry pruned to a Spanish bush shape. The Spanish bush, you cut your growth annually back to about 30 centimetres, and every year you keep pruning it back and it becomes very bushy. So rather than having a great big tall tree, you end up with all its energy in a much smaller bush. It is very overgrown at the moment, but cherry trees shouldn't be pruned until springtime, and as the sap starts rising and the buds start swelling, I'll prune it then. And just here I have a cherry guava. I have no idea why it's got fruit on it at the moment. It's an autumn fruiting plant, but you know, I guess these seasons are a bit weird. A little bit further to the east I have a row of pears growing. They're all on dwarf rootstock. There's 4 that are underneath the semi-permanent net that goes over the berries, and another 2 outside just beyond. And over further east there's what was supposed to be a fan-trained peach tree, but didn't work like the books say it should. And right at the end there's a tiny little almond tree, and it's just coming into flower, which is lovely. So I succeeded a little better with my espalier on the pear trees, and I get quite a lot of fruit. They come in, all of the fruit trees are planted with the aim of having fruit over a very long period. I think the pear tree in front of me is the one that comes in first. It has very small pears that are really great when you pickle them. And the next one along also has very small pears but a little bit larger, and they come in February. Then the next ones come in March, and the last one comes in about April. So if we look in here, I've grown the pears to the north side of the garden in the hope that I could slow the wind down and cool it a bit before it got onto the raspberries. So my raspberries are in very poor condition. They've worked well for a few years, and now each year they come up a little bit weaker, and I'm not getting very many fruit. So next year I'm going to move them. Or these are going to get taken out this year. I'll do some work on the soil over summer, a couple of cover crops, and hopefully next year where the raspberries are I'll grow blueberries, and the raspberries will go in next winter, and hopefully we'll have some lovely fruit for the next Christmas. taking a closer look at the peach tree, you can see there's 2 or 3 long branches with no growth on them. Well, those branches are never going to bear fruit. All the fruit comes in the last season's wood, which is sort of in a little bunch all up round the top. So what I ought to be doing is cutting the long branches back right down to the base or very close to the bottom there, and using the little branches down the bottom as my scaffolding again and starting all over again with it. But it bears a reasonable amount of fruit. It has been overshadowed by a great big native that finally succumbed to its age limit, and so hopefully next year the almond tree and this little peach tree will end up giving me beautiful fruit. And up here, if I don't know if we'll be able to see it, yep, there we go. First of the almonds flowers are in. So watch out for the cockatoos because they'll be eating the blossom very shortly. I've now moved right to the east border of the property, and here in front of me I have 1, 2, 3 very stunted little plum trees. These plum trees are about 10 years old and they're about 1 metre tall. The green gauge up the top there has never given me any fruit. This little one just gives me enough to tempt me. It's a Santa Rosa, and this one's a yellow plum. I think I had fruit on it a couple of years ago. So now that they're not overshadowed, I have great hope for the future. As you can see, there is a lot of weed growth underneath them. Some weeds are tolerable and some really need to go, but I've been busy somewhere else. And we have this problem with Oxalis. Is it? Yes, it is a weed, and I don't like it, so I try and pull it out. But when you think about it, it grows up lush in winter when there's moisture about. It dies down in summer, so it doesn't compete against your fruit trees. So maybe I should just be a little bit more tolerant of it. Of course, I've also got warrigal greens that I eat, and there's lots of flat leaf parsley in amongst it, and one of those bitter herbs that is actually growing in a toilet bowl just here. So it's looking pretty healthy, and I don't really eat it very much. I really ought to take it out. It is an invasive weed with a very long root. Well, the other thing I forgot to mention about Oxalis, if you're going to pull it out, you should pull it out before it flowers, because at that point it grows all its little bulbils all over the place, and you're going to have more of them anyway, so why bother? Chop them down, maybe. And with its very long root, it's probably similar, in a similar manner to dandelion. I imagine that it brings a lot of minerals to the surface of the soil, and as it dies down it will dump all those minerals back onto the surface where it's more available for shallow growing vegetables. So there's got to be an upside to it somewhere. Besides its pretty flower, I find it difficult to like it. Looking up towards the chook house, there's a macadamia that's finally started to grow. It's struggled for about 5 years and now it's finally taking off. Haven't seen any flowers on it up to this year, but we live in hope. And there's the old almond tree that was here when we first arrived, and it's just in blossom now, which is wonderful. I'll take the camera down a little bit closer. That's a little mandarin tree. It's 2 years old. It struggled last summer. I think I know I had a problem with my watering system and it didn't get sufficient water for a while. Up behind it is another mandarin which did quite well. I think it's a bit hungry because it's got that great big bay tree up behind it that takes all the nutrients and water that it can get. That's going to get trimmed back severely one day. I've been threatening it for a long time, and I'll get round to it. Great big rosemary. I think that's one of the original rosemaries. Most of my rosemary bushes came from 2 that I bought very early when I came here, and I've just grown the rest of them from cuttings, so there's rosemary all over the place, which is good. And here I have a little lime tree that's just starting to get some limes now. I've had a couple of ripe ones already, and it's doing quite well. But over here I have a very sad story. This, I think it's an ex-lemon tree here. It's gone deciduous. But anyway, such is life. And up behind is a little orange tree that I planted last year. It's not doing too badly, but it's not doing that well. So I'm not really sure what the problem is. I'm going to do a pH test and then just make sure that it gets sufficient water over summer, and hopefully, now that I've removed one of the almonds last year, it's underneath that pot of weeds, I hope that there will be sufficient water to keep things going. And last but not least, I should mention the little variegated kumquat. It's supposed to be incredibly hardy, but I had to move it from somewhere more hostile to a less hostile spot. It sulked for about 3 years, and now it's finally started to bush up and give me some fruit. Over here you can see a couple of posts. They're set in at an angle, and there's going to be 2 grapevines going in there. I think they're called strawberry grapes. I've not tasted them, they're Michelle's, and I hope that they will be lovely. I have it on good authority that they are really, really tasty grapes.